Okay, so welcome to the 6th video on indices, and by the end of this lesson we should be able to use negative and zero indices, and we're going to be looking at the 5th and 6th law of indices relating to these. So let's try and get a bit of the intuition for zero indices first of all. Suppose we were to find the result of 2 squared divided by 2 squared. Well, 2 squared is 4, so we know that this is going to be 4 divided by 4, and any number divided by itself is of course 1. Now let's use a different technique to get to the same answer. Say we were to do 2 squared divided by 2 squared. Using the second law of indices, we're going to subtract these indices and we're going to get 2 to the power of 0. And we know that that also must be 1 because it's still 2 squared divided by 2 squared. Okay, so they are equivalent. Now let's try and find 5 to the power of 7 divided by 5 to the power of 7. You should know already that any number divided by itself is just 1, so this is going to be 1. But let's use the law of indices here to get to the same conclusion. So this brings us to the 5th law of indices, which says that any number raised to the power of 0 is just 1. Now let's look at negative indices. Suppose we were to find this sum here. Well, we could use the first law of indices to add up the indices of the same bases for top and bottom. So we'd get 2 to the power of 6 divided by 2 to the power of 8. And say we were to divide top and bottom by 2 to the power of 6. So we're dividing top and bottom by the same number here, which effectively means we're dividing this by 1, and we're simplifying it, we're factoring out the 2 to the power of 6 here. And what we get is 1 divided by 2 squared. Now if we were to instead do it that way, we were going to use the laws of indices. You know that it would be 2 to the power of 6 minus 8, and we get 2 to the power of negative 2. So again, we've got two equivalents. We've got 2 to the negative 2 is equal to 1 divided by 2 to the positive 2. And this brings us to the 6th law of indices, which states that any number raised to a negative power is 1 over that number raised to the positive of the power. So examples here would be 6 to the power of negative 4 would be 1 divided by 6 to the positive 4. X to the power of negative 1 is going to be 1 over x to the positive 1, which is just 1 over x. We got y to the negative x. What do you think this will be? It's going to be 1 divided by y to the positive x. So in recap for these two laws, any number raised to the power of 0 is 1, and any number raised to a negative power is the same as 1 over that number raised to the positive of that power.